Thank you so much. First of all, thank you very much for the organizers for having this festival, this political festival, and also facilitating this, I think, very important debate, and I've been looking forward to participate. In Denmark, we see ourselves as frontrunners when it comes to the climate policy, and we have set the target from the government side that we would manage to reach a decrease of CO2 emission by 70% in 2030. And therefore, we also had the ambition to make a very ambitious agricultural policy. And it was very difficult to negotiate that because we know that agriculture is among, also as you said, Ralph, among the sectors emitting most CO2. But actually last year we managed to have a broad coalition with close to all political parties in the Danish parliament, from the far left to the far right. I believe more than 90% of the members in the parliament to back this agreement, and it's among the most ambitious agreement on agricultural policy in Europe and in the world. And when I'm traveling around, lots of other politicians from other countries are envying Denmark for having this policy. And we have set the target to reduce CO2 emission within the sector with between 55 to 65%, but also to live up to the EU water environment framework. And that means that we will lower the amount of nitrogen, and we will manage that actually without having a direct policy for reducing the amount of animals. Because we believe in Denmark that we are among the farmers who can produce meat in the most climate effective way. So if we had a policy to cut it down, then we could be in the risk of moving the problem from Denmark to another country where they would pollute even more. So that's the reason that we were quite concerned about doing it in a right way. But that said, we also have a policy of, for instance, nutrition guidelines, saying to Danish people, it's better for your health and it's better for the environment if you eat a little bit less meat and more vegetables and legumes, because that would mean that you could avoid lifestyle diseases as cancer, diabetes, heart diseases, and so on. But it's also a way to cut down the emission on CO2. So that is a way to inspire people to change a little bit. And I believe in the future we will eat more vegetables, more legumes, and that's also a reason that we in this bill, in this agreement, have decided to put more money into eco schemes to support farmers who would invest in plants and legumes. So that's a way. And therefore, and on top of that, and I have to stop now, we also have initiatives on new technologies. For instance, we are working with methane-reducing feed additives to livestock, and we are also working with more efficient handling of manure in farms and fields. And then we have new initiatives on pyrolysis, where you take waste materials from the farms and change it into biochar that you can capture the CO2, and then in that process you can also make biofuel. So within few years, I believe that I will be able to take an airplane from Aalborg to Copenhagen without being criticized for being a climate enemy, because we can do it on biofuel create from pyrolysis, and that change is actually speeding up at the moment due to this very great agreement supported by a very broad political coalition. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Torgunnar Kofod.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel discussion. We have a very big challenge in front of us. Last Wednesday, I was to a conference in Geneva, a UN conference where FAO participated as well, and they made some figures. In 1946, we had about 8 square meters per person in the world to produce food. Today we have 0.8 square meter per person. In 2030 we have 0.5 to 0.6 square meter per person. So the biggest challenge is that we need to produce a lot more, because as Rasmus just said, we have to use plants for a lot of other purposes than just food and feed. And another thing is that only a little bit more than the half of that soil where we produce plants today is actually in the circumstances that we can produce food for human being. The rest is only that we can produce plants for animals. So we need to take the last things that Rasmus talked about, new technology. We need to look at all the new things, all the new technologies to put into modern farming, and we need to produce a lot more food and feed on all these things. And if we look at the big discussion, farming or nature, yes, we need to have a nature, because if we don't have the nature, we have a lot of crops will die. We need to have bees for pollinators, and we need to have the nature to catch lost nitrogen that is not polluting. So we need to look on the landscape in a completely new way in the future. Maybe we need to build up, maybe we need to have 10,000 hectares more of lakes with water, so where we catch the water that's not running out, that we can use the water for irrigating the land in dry season, because some of the crops we need in the future, grass, a lot more grass, it need water in the summertime, and the grass is a very big crop because it's produced a lot more than grain, both the protein, the starch, the sugar, and the fibers. And the grass, we have a very big gold egg in Denmark, where we actually can take the grass and produce protein, and in a few years we can take the sugar out, and we have the fibers for the industry. And the fibers for the industry have to push out all the fibers we today use in the industry to make plastics and cars and whatever you use it for. But today the fibers come from the carbon, from the fossil carbon. So we need to be very clever. So the most important thing of this very big, great agreement they made in the Parliament, it is the last things you talked about, the future technology. And the good prices in the agriculture now will make the farmers in the situations that they take these new technology. It will run a lot faster than the politician can manage to make new rules. So I am very positive for the future. Thank you.
Thanks. And Søren Rasmussen?
Yes, thank you. I'm a farmer and do a lot of farming and also in more countries in Europe. And my motto is that the farmer in the future and today should produce all the energy and all the food. And why I say that is we are going to do that together. Also, what you're talking about, all this new technology. And therefore, we can produce more food and more energy if we take this new technology. It's biogas, pyrolyse, and we have it right now in Denmark. We have good opportunities to use them. And we have to implement them very fast, and that is, if we have to reach the target in 8 years, we have to go very fast. And if you see out of a Danish context, you know, we have our energy come from wind, solar, and a lot of biomass we burn in power plants, and that's some old technology, but we have to get the new technology in place so we can stop with burning all this biomass, because you destroy a lot of things that you are going to get it back to the fields, the carbon and the nitrogen and the phosphor and the calcium. So now it's also very important that we get a whole solution, not this split solution with we are burning something. That's a split solution we cannot do it for many years, because then we cannot be so many people on the earth. And also in that context we should produce and use many things, vegetable, all these things, more local instead of global, instead of transport the apples from the other side of the world. We have seasons, we can produce everything we can we can get vegetable in Denmark all the year produced in Denmark instead of getting them from Argentina by airplane or something. So it's also a more regional and local thinking of producing. So this the world is have a lot of transport, and we can see we have also had the transport crisis. So we can see what that get an influence on industry and everything. So we have to catch all this in one goal. So and get the solution so we can produce more with less input.
Thanks, all of you, and some of the issues we'll be discussing here in the next 45 minutes. And I think we can probably all agree in this room that we'd like to reduce the CO2 emission. To start off with you, Francisco, when you look at food production, what is the biggest challenge in your eyes?
I think the biggest change that we need to make is the paradigm. So we live in a consumption-driven based model, economic model, social model, and so this reflects into all sections. And if you talk about agriculture, what it was here stated is that we need to grow more to feed the world. This is fake. He talked about, sorry, not fake your assumption, but it's misinterpreted, because he talked about FAO data, but the FAO data is related to all citizens in the world. And obviously, in some parts of the world, they don't have the protein that they need. And some of those areas, because our consumption model, because we import a lot of those products, and so they don't have the internal markets to feed their own citizens. But the WHO, the World Health Organization, says that, for example, in Occidental societies, we eat too much animal protein. And so the problem is not lack of food. We have enough food to feed everyone that is on the planet, and obviously taking into consideration that the population is still growing, but that's also not a problem, because before 2100, the population would stagnate and will decrease. In China, they are starting to make that analysis, because the population is starting to shrink. And so the problem is not the lack of food, is the distribution of food. For example, in Europe, 1/3 of our food is wasted. And so we have the biggest problem is the model. So we produce food. Some of that is to export, to gain higher value in the market, not to feed the populations that are here. And then we have a model that is also based on animal production, a lot of animal production. And that is the most inefficient way of us having the nutrients that we need. Several studies have shown that if we go to a plant-based diet, we don't have to be all vegan or vegetarian or whatever, but to have more vegetable, legumes, and those kind of products in our diets, we improve health, we improve environment, we improve animal welfare, we have more lands to regenerate to biodiversity, we preserve water. For example, 1 liter of milk is 1,000 liters that requires for water. 1 kilogram of beef is 14,000 liters of water, and for some countries, I come from Portugal, there's a huge issue, water scarcity, and we also have soil erosion, and so we need to shift the paradigm. And if you continue to say to our citizens that we need to consume everything that we consume as we have made, we are telling a lie, in my perspective. And just to finish, we also need to then have the political solutions that make this transition real. And so when we talk about public money, if you continue to invest a lot on animal farming, we won't reach the goals that we have. We have now new technologies that we talked here, but we also have cellular meats. We have different types of animals that are being created that are more efficient. Obviously, this shocks with our culture, but for example, cricket, it's a very efficient way to produce protein. We have several other products that are plant-based, that are a huge industry that is growing, but we need to direct the public money to those kind of industries, because they have really a ratio higher that will help us to make the transition to a decarbonized society and to a healthier society. That I think it's all our objective.
We'll dive into some of these things. A small thing in one way, you mentioned food waste. And Rasmus, I don't know if you can legislate here. I read that in Denmark alone, more than 500,000 ton of food is thrown out every year, food that could be eaten by other people. How do you solve this?
In Denmark, we have the approach when it comes to food waste and food loss that we believe in partnerships and alliances rather than legislation. We have seen examples from Spain and France with legislation that really didn't have the effect that they intended to have. But in Denmark, we have partnerships with our industry. Perhaps, for instance, in the dairy industry, you have a lot of rest from milk and other things. And now we have invested in new technologies to secure that you can use all the milk and all the butter in the machines instead of having all the rest, all the waste. And when it comes to supermarkets, we have alliances working with, for instance, smaller packages. So in many families, they don't have 2 adults and 2 children any longer. They are perhaps single or living 2 together. So it's smarter to have a smaller package. And then when the food is close to being too old, then you have a discount on it and you will put it in the front of the supermarket. And then we also have a task force working with how to make it easier for supermarkets to donate food waste to, for instance, homeless people, social initiatives and all that. Actually, yesterday I was in Copenhagen at our national stadium Parken, together with the company Too Good To Go and also the Nordic supermarket chain Coop. And they had an initiative where you could have a bag of food for free, and it was food waste. And there's a lot of that kind of initiatives. So I believe in the future, due to our partnerships, due to our alliances, we will actually solve this problem with food waste and food loss. And we have also tried to say, in the midst of this crisis, where you can see the prices are going up, and it's very expensive to be a family and buying ordinary goods for your family, then we try to emphasize for people, try to work with food waste and food loss. And you can actually save money in doing that. So we have a calculation, it's something like for an average family, the prices have going up with a little bit below 500 kroner a month, but you can actually save half of it if you stop wasting food and stop wasting food, but also working with the nutrition guidelines. So if you eat a little bit more vegetables and legumes, it could also be cheaper. And then you can save the money to have quality beef when you actually decide to have the meat. So that's the way we are working with it. Try to mobilize people. And it seems like Denmark is among the countries who have the biggest success in changing people's mindset on this. But of course, we are also open for legislation, but we have to find the solutions so they actually work. And the experience from France and Spain are not good.
Now, Thor, one of the things Francisco said was that you don't believe you have to produce more, you just have to, in a way, use it smarter, if you can say it like that. What do you think about that?
He's right and wrong, because we don't need to produce more in the world, but we need to produce more per hectare, because the area where we can produce will be smaller in the future for every year. The deserts are increasing with about half of France's land area every year, so actually we need to produce more per hectare. So we need to change the crops to that. Do we need to produce soybeans all over to produce the proteins for the animals? We can use grass and small legumes like clovers and other things to produce the proteins, and use the technology to feed the animals. So in that way we need to be a lot more clever. But another thing with the food waste, for example, at the first, when the prices are increasing tremendously like they're doing now, and even more until Christmas, we know that the market will change and people will buy less and everything. And I know that the Danish food industry, they're working a lot with the food waste that we have to throw out, that the packing and the wrapping around the food doesn't need to be plastic from the fossils. It can be plastic we can put in the biogas plants, and we can actually use for energy, that it is not a waste but a new input to new things, for example, industry. And after that, we can use the fibers from the biogas to the pyrolyze, and then we can use, we have the whole change back to the soil. So all that change that we have to look at the technology, how we can produce something else in a new way on the land, we need to take it into our production, and it need to go fast, because all the protein in the world, if you only calculate on the protein needed for the society, we can't rely on the soybeans, because they are not producing proteins enough per hectare and then compared to the land, because the photosynthesis is too short in a year on the soybean in compared to grass and clover. So we need to turn the production into another way if we have to supply the world. And that's why we have a lot of new technologies on the way in Denmark. So this package that the government and the Danish parliament made, that we look at the new technology, wait 2-3 years, it is another discussion we have, because then it is these technologies, we have seen them, they are on the way, and especially in the energy sector, how they can take all the waste from the agriculture and convert it to value. And it will make the money to the change in agriculture.
I get you in a second, Søren. I'd just like to ask you, Francisco, because as Thor says, it is true the population of the world is growing rapidly. So we still have to produce some more, or do you
No.
recognize that?
If we continue to this type of consumption, yes, of course. But for me, it's clear that if we continue this type of consumption, every citizen in the world has the right to have this type of consumption that we have in the European Union, and there's no technology that can feed the world at the pace and the fastness that we need to decarbonize at the same time the society. It's impossible. You can have aquaculture, you can have cellular meats that has some years to go to make it like commercial viable. You can grow crickets, you can do all the things that you want. It's impossible for us to feed the world if we continue this consumption model. That's why I say that we need to shift the paradigm and to eat less meat products, to have less, because you talked about soy, and it's true, but if we analyze, the majority of soy that we import is to feed livestock. We are talking about in the range of 65 to 75% of the soy is to feed animals. And so this is a very inefficient way to produce food. And that's why I'm vegan, but I'm not an apologist of saying people what they should eat or should not eat. And so, but we have policies that direct people to consumption or not. If we subsidize heavily the meat industry, the dairy industry, the price will be very low, and it's externalizing all the costs. The importation of soy, the water that it consumes, the soil that it degrades, also the investment that is not being made on animal welfare. And so the real cost that we have on the shelves, it's in reality not a real thing. And so if we don't internalize all these costs and be clear to citizens to say, we cannot maintain this level of consumption of these products, we have to make solutions. And that's why I say that in this paradigm, it's impossible for us to feed the world, obviously, but it's not a problem of lack of food. We have more than enough food nowadays with our current technology to feed everyone in the planet.
Now, very simplified, meat is often a sort of scapegoat when you discuss this in farming. We should just all stop eating meat. I'd like to hear the two farmers here in the panel. How do you see the future of meat production in Denmark and the rest of Europe?
I see that I think that the meat production will decrease 10-15%, but it's important that we have this agriculture have to the meat production and the fertilizer and the energy production is something of the same, because we need it all, and we can produce and get the green energy for the aeroplanes and everything out of the waste, out of the straw, out of the tree. So if we do it together, we can manage to have near to the same production, at my opinion.
And just you first, Thor?
Of health reason, we need to eat less meat in the West world, less meat and fat, because it is the biggest health problem we have in the West world. But
Rasmus,
Yeah, I think it's there's no doubt that in the future, also for health reasons, as Thor Gunnar is saying, we will eat less meat and more vegetable and more legumes. But it's a kind of dilemma because Thor Gunnar is right when he says that in the developing countries, there's a tendency that if they become richer, they will buy more meat. So therefore, we could be in the situation where we need to produce more meat in the future. And actually, when we had the discussion while we were negotiating in the parliament, we had a visit from the world-leading scientist, Timothy Sertinger, and he said, Denmark is among the front-runners and the best in class to produce meat in a climate-effective way. So take care. If you make less meat, then there's a chance that this production will go to Poland or Bulgaria or Germany or another country where they are not as effective as we are when it comes to climate. And that will give a netto more increase of CO2 emission. And that's the reason that he was a little bit skeptical about that. And that's the reason that we make the decision in a way where we said, we will continue having meat production in Denmark, but investing in doing it in a more climate effective way. But then at the same time, we have a strategy for Danish farmers to invest much more in plants and legumes, because we have dedicated eco schemes for that. And then in 5 or 10 years' time, we might have a shift, because then in a worldwide level, you will see that many more have understand the message that for health reasons and for climate reasons, you should eat less meat, and also new products created by plants are developed. And in that time, I think we will produce less meat, but it has to be an evolution rather than a revolution.
Do you accept that this claim that if we, for example, in Denmark, it could be Portugal, produce less meat, then other countries will just produce instead?
No, I think this argument is important. Why do other countries associate the consumption of animals with a social elevation of their status? Because it's cultural, because they imported that notion from us. And we are now learning that this is not a correlation. We are not healthier, we are not wealthier, we don't have less environmental problems if we consume more meat. And so if we continue to share this paradigm, this cultural paradigm, that you can eat picanha, I don't know if you call it like here, it's like meat from Brazil, every day, at every hour, and consume everything with the shelves always filled up and packed. What is our responsibility to say to other countries that you cannot do this? They will do this. And so if we continue to share that our paradigm is correct, and we just need to find new ways to produce food. I think in that perspective, well, obviously we cannot do anything.
So we should be a role model instead.
I think we should be a role modeling, and if we are so concerned about these type of things, let's export technology. Let's give them technology, because the majority of the emissions were made by industrialized societies, and Europe is one of the biggest ones that has this cultural footprint, and so we are the biggest polluters, and they are in the beginning of the revolution of their industrial revolution, so to say, and they are picking up pace. And so if we are very concerned about the impact that they are having with these industries, let's export the technology. Let's help them not do the footsteps that we all made, and let's help them skip these phases. And I think it's also relevant for us to talk. We're talking about South America. Again, the majority of the production of South America is to export. So we are the biggest consumers of those products. And if we don't build our markets to have more legumes, to have more localized production, to help the farmers, because this is not against the farmers. I think no one here is against the farmers. On the contrary, if we respect that and we direct public money to this type of transition, I think the farmers will have more money, new industries will be built. Here the minister said that new plant-based industries are being built, and they are $1 billion euro industries. They are really, really massive. And so we could help them to skip up these phases, but I don't think that we should continue to say that we need to produce here more animals to feed the world, because we are a net importer. Europe is a net importer of food. And so we really have to be careful with these narratives, or else we will be saying to others, okay, you just have to do the same as us, because, well, if we continue this paradigm, well, you should do it too. And regarding revolution, I agree. As a politician, I don't think we should impose anything on others, but I think as an individual, we should be talking about our responsibility also to environments, to other animals. We cannot forget, we are talking about animals, but we are talking about sentient beings. They understand clearly what's happening in their lifetime. And so, if we have more extensive production, if we have cellular meats that reduces the production of animals, and we just have some cellulose that can replicate, those kind of things are in the end good for animal welfare, because, well, we are reducing the suffering of these animals. Because if anyone has the courage, go to a slaughterhouse and see how animals are killed. We talk about human killing, but it's very hard to be in a slaughterhouse. And so the intensive production is also very hard. And so we really also have to have these debates if us as a society want to continue to promote this type of industry, or we want to help the industry make changes so they can have more extensive production, cellular meats, more plant-based, that balances the sheet.
You had a comment, Tor?
Yes, because most of it, I'm actually not disagree with you, because we need to go in that direction. And we are doing a lot of investment and research in these things and these technologies. And the aim is not Denmark. The market for these technologies is not Denmark. It is actually the world. And but 3 years ago, none of these technology was known. Some few scientists knew them, and they worked with them for years, and some of them for decades. But then there came a situation in the world, and all these technology came out of the door. And now we try to put them into industrial production, and we hope that they can succeed. When they succeed, all these companies who has invested the money in these technologies, they want to go out on the world market. Because what we are producing in Denmark, the CO2 emission about it is going up or down, it doesn't matter. It is 0.001% of the CO2 emission in the world. So it is a technology we are inventing. As fast as we can implement these technologies in the world, as fast as we will help the climate. And it is a reason that the Danish agriculture push a lot to that, especially in the political way, focus on the technology, help us to implement these technology, because it is these things who is helping.
Søren, as a farmer, but you're also someone who helps other farmers when they need to make some innovation in their farm. Is it true? Are Danish farmers willing to take these steps?
Yeah, it's as it's both the farmers and the energy sector, because Danish farmers are not the richest in the world, I know. Because it's a hard business to be a farmer, and so we have to connect the energy sector and the farmers. And also the technology from some is brought to the market by farmers and some by the industry. But what we can in Denmark, it's work together, and the agriculture and the energy sector are close together, because we see that it all come out of the land. The wind turbines stand on the farmer's land, the solar panels stand on the farmer's fields. So they are out there, and if we take all this technology together, we can make the solution, and we can make it fast, because the technology are very close to be on the market. And we can do it in Denmark and then go to the rest of the world.
Sure.
But there's one thing for the Danish farmers. If you look at Søren as a farmer, these technologies in energy production and with the production of straw in a special way and these things, packaging of straw, this technology, when he invested in this technology, they was new. Nobody believed in them. And what Danish farmers can, it is to take the new technology. The day that they can see in the future there's a business, they invest in it. And I don't think you have other industries in Denmark especially, or in Europe, who are so willing to invest in new technologies as the Danish farmers are. And so I'm proud to be part of these, or representing these farmers, that we actually do it. And very good that we have these guys like Søren and the other crew who's here.
Now, Rasmus Prehn, one of the remarks that Francisco had was about technology and making it available for everyone. Now we have, you probably know the figure exactly. There's a lot of money from the Danish state who goes out to development countries every year. Could we use this as some sort of help for them? Give them some more electronics so they could produce in a way as we do here in Denmark?
There's no doubt that it's really high on our agenda in Denmark to invest in new technology. And as a part of this agreement, we were settled here in October last year, was to invest massively in new technology. And therefore we are among the front runners when it comes to technology. But it's also a part of our developing policy to help other countries. So we do it both as a help initiative, but also as an export initiative. And where it's possible, we build up alliances with other countries, and we try to invest and help so they can have better and more sustainable farming. But then at the same time, we also have partners that we can make trade with in the future. So we do it with developing countries, but we also help other countries. So, for instance, last spring, I was in California in the United States, and we have a very close cooperation on dairy production. And to visit the farmers in California was quite interesting, because even though they believed they were about the absolute front runners in the United States and in the world, I could see that they were like 20, 30 years back compared to us in Denmark. And therefore it was interesting to be there with Danish farmers, Danish engineers, and try to have the dialogue about how can we create this process in a much more energy effective way, in a much more sustainable way for environment and climate, but also in a way where they could have much more output. And they were very happy about it. And that's really made me proud as a Danish minister to see that it's actually our Danish farmers who can inspire the rest of the world. And we should continue doing that, and we are good at it, and we do it for the purpose of helping, but also in the long run to build up businesses And if you can combine that, it's really good.
Now, there's a lot of talking about Danish farming, Francisco. We are in Denmark, that's how it is. I like to return to my apple here because, as I said, I bought it here in Nordjylland. It's from New Zealand. And I shouldn't have bought it. But if I couldn't buy it, I wouldn't have bought it. And if it costs twice as much as a Danish apple, I wouldn't have bought it. How do we stop this? How do we stop this thing where we just send food all around the world?
Well, this is the model that we made it with globalization, that we have less trade barriers, and so the products, they are intensively produced and then shipped all over the world, because the scale, if we do it like a regular economic model, helps this type of model. But we don't internalize all costs, because if we did internalize the costs, the water scarcity, the soil erosion, all this kind of variables, it would be impossible for us, or very expensive for us to have an apple.
But how do you do that then?
That you internalize the costs. So when you make the calculation of what costs a product, you internalize those costs. The water that you use, the land that you use, the CO2 that you emit, and when you have that product internalized in the cost, it's impossible for a producer to sell it as a price it is, because all of these costs of you having a food, you, me, anyone having an apple from New Zealand is externalized to the environment. And that's why we have the climate crisis, because this is not decoupled from our consumption and production model. That's why it's very important what we did in European Parliament, that was to pass the farm to fork strategy. That is a very important strategy for us to produce more locally, to try to build up local markets, regional markets, to establish chains of production, distribution and consumption of foods more localized, that will help internalize these costs, help farmers produce this kind of products, value those kind of products, and make it less appealing for massive productions around the world to enter our continent. We also have a carbon tax from products abroad that is being negotiated now, that can be applied to several products. Let's see if it happens also to agriculture products. It's difficult because we also have international rules that we cannot overpass. So it's a difficult path. But in the end, we have another tool that is making it very difficult for farmers to reach this goal. That is the Common Agricultural Policy, that implies the money, or gives the money to the common production of food. That is very intensive. That is more based to the export of this type of products, and so we have like an unbalanced situation, but we are trying as much as we can to localize production, distribution, consumption, tackle food waste, and in the end also improve biodiversity with a biodiversity strategy, also decreasing pesticides, giving more support to eco schemes to farmers, and so in that perspective so a win in a way, it's a loss in another. Let's see if we can scale up this type of mindset change. But what the Minister said is it's relevant also, working with other partners. So the retailers they are very important. When you have products that are in the end of the line, put them at a price lower so consumers can reach out to them, especially local products. And we are talking about retailers, big, medium, or small markets. So this has to be very coherent, and so use all the actors for us to have like a better approach while we produce food and consume this type of foods.
And Rasmus Prehn, if you prohibited this, you would probably have the New Zealand Prime Minister on the phone or something like that. So you can't do that. How do we stop this?
There's no doubt that we should do much more also to make it easier for our customers to choose products that are local. And we have discussion in Europe about labeling. So could we label a little bit more precise or more visible so it's easier for the consumers to pick the local products? That could be a way to do it. We have, of course, free trade, and it's difficult to intervene in that. And when it comes to the climate discussion, it's also very discussed whether or not it's actually that bad for climate because the transport is not that big a part of the emission. So it's a little bit discussed. But for many other reasons, it's good to have locally produced products. And as I see it, there's a tendency in Denmark going to eating much more local and much more in season. And if we look into our gastronomical scene, Denmark is well known to have some of the best restaurants in the world. And actually, they are well known for be front runners when it comes to use plant-based food, but also local food in season. And in that way, I see that they can inspire the ordinary customer to think about, oh, I should actually be aware of what I'm eating. Is this a local product, or is it something that is in season? Perhaps I should wait to have this strawberry till it's in season. And when it's not in season, I should find some other things to eat. And I think there is an increase in that awareness. Of course, it's slow, and we would like to speed it up, but there is a tendency in that direction, and I would like to help it as minister.
But Thor and Søren, isn't there some sort of paradox here? Because you, as farmers, you like to sell your products in the US or in China, so it's a good thing in some ways that you can export food.
Of course, but if you make the calculation, because of course when you say it isn't terrible that we fly that apple from New Zealand to Europe, everybody will say, of course. But if you look at the life circles calculation, how it is produced, take into the consideration land use change and all these things. We, for example, produce a lot of green salad in Denmark and export to South Europe. And if you look at the greenhouse emission in that salad, the transport, it is nothing in compared to the land use change. And how we produce it here, how efficient we produce it, and especially in the season when we produce it, how is the weather in the south of Europe on that period of the year. So if we put all these things into the calculation, it is not so dangerous that we are having this transport. At the moment now we are getting strawberries from Bodø, Lofoten in Norway, because they have had the sun. They start very late in the season. They have the midnight sun, and then they have the red strawberry in July, August. So it is not a problem that we are getting from north of Norway at the moment that have the transport. But if we buy them from other places in the world, in Greece, in greenhouse, where they use lightning and water irrigation and everything, and put these things in, it is maybe not so difficult. So we need to be very careful where we ban something out, because it is if you look at the feelings, it is not good. We need to make the life circle calculations, and especially on the health of the people, that it is very important that we are getting the apples. It is very important that we are eating the salad instead of eating something else, and we have it fresh on the market every day. It is very important.
You have a comment on this, Søren?
Yes, I have. I'm only investing in sustainable, also agriculture, and I'm not proud of that we export a lot to China, but I see it more like the northern part of Europe, and you can say in the EU, we are producing 120% of food and 60% of our energy. Therefore I said that the farmers in the future should produce more energy and materials and a little less food, because the export too far away, will close down sooner or later. So the local, the regional thinking also should be implemented in farmers' thinking and politics and other things. And then the climate can also, like Thor said, can make something. We maybe also should produce more of something in Denmark because of the climate, and something in Norway because it's move where you can produce things on land, because the weather and the temperature, you can see there's near 30 degrees in Maya in late August. That's not normal, but maybe the new normal.
Yeah.
So all these things we should be aware about.
We are within the last 10 minutes, and I promise if anyone of you had any questions, I would allow some time. Does anyone have anything to ask?
I just want to say that there's
Yes.
no stupid questions. So be at ease and be provocative if you want.
Maybe I'll finish up then by talking about the future, because you've spoken about changing the mindset of both the farmers and the consumers, and we have also spoken a lot about technology that might be able to solve some of these issues, but some of these things sounds like a bit of a long haul. Are you, Francisco, optimistic or pessimistic when it comes to this?
Well, I would like to say I'm optimistic because I'm a very optimistic person, but in looking at the reality, I don't feel as much, although everyone should do as much as he can to help the transition. But the signs are clear. We continue to emit more greenhouse gases than we should, and it's continually growing. So we even in COVID, we did not decrease, and we stopped the entire world. So this is very serious. We see now that it was talked about, we are having this type of temperature in August here that is not regular. So this is all over the world. In Portugal, we are facing droughts. In Spain, in France, the nuclear power plants are shutting down because they don't have enough water to cool down the system. So we have an energy problem, adding up to the crisis that we have in Ukraine. So this is all interconnected. And so if we don't start to be honest with citizens, in my perspective, and telling that we cannot continue this growth paradigm and consumption paradigm, it's impossible. We can't talk about technology, we can talk about beautiful things, unicorns and so on and so forth. We cannot solve this problem. And the climate crisis is connected to everything: housing, economics, wealth distribution, agriculture, fisheries. And so the ecological paradigm should shift. We should be very honest talking about this. We should follow science, and science helps us to balance our policies. In the end, it's always the political will that drives most of our decisions. But in the end, we should really be honest talking about what we should be doing. In my perspective, we should be talking very hard, honestly, with citizens, saying that we should be decreasing the consumption of animal products. They have a huge, huge impact on our health, on our environment, on animal welfare, obviously. And we should be shifting this growth paradigm that we should be consuming everything, every day, at all hours, at every sector: the transportation, food. I was talking about yesterday also on clothes. So we should really stop this growth paradigm that is the base model of nowadays every society. And we should reflect on different paradigm that we shift to a more access-based than possession-based model. We can see that with transportation. We don't need, for example, our transportation 90% of the time, and you still have one car per person, per house. That's economically nonsensical. And so we really have to rethink our growth paradigm and share a new paradigm that is giving more to citizens, that is restoring environments, and in the end is giving a future to our children.
And Rasmus Prehn, you talked a lot about the initiatives in the Danish government, but it's also well-known fact that we'll pretty soon have an election here in Denmark. If you know the date, you can share it with us. We would like to hear it. But then we could have another government, and maybe some new, some things would have to start all over. Do we have enough time the way it's going right now? Are you optimistic?
I have a tendency to be a little bit depressed at the moment because of so many changes in the world. And actually the war in Ukraine has changed a lot of the mindset. The climate change is not something that we discuss any longer, it's a fact. As Francisco said, we can see floods, we can see droughts, we can see fires in forests, and it's very close to us. And we simply have to do something with it. And I think that's the reason that we actually managed in the Danish parliament to have this very broad coalition backing this super ambitious agricultural policy. So when it comes to agricultural policy, I think even though we have a shift in government after the election, they will continue with a lot of it because we are in this coalition on this. But of course they will take other initiatives and change it a little bit and implement it in another way and all that. But we actually managed to have a very ambitious European agricultural policy. But then when we had the war, people were talking about food. And therefore we need a double-sided strategy. So not only have a strategy on climate, but also a strategy on how to make Africa more sustainable and more able to produce their own food. And it's quite crazy to see that they still have huge areas with tobacco, for instance, instead of growing food. And I think we should help them building up an agricultural sector so they could provide more food for themselves. Because otherwise, in the long run, we will have the same situation. So if there's a lack of food from Ukraine to Africa, and many of the North African countries have import 90% of their wheat or something like that. So if they are not able to have that, then they are in a deep, deep crisis. And therefore we need to work with developing policy as well.
Yes, and actually the time is up, but I promised you had maybe a question we can try to give a short answer. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Claus Vestergaard, and I'm running a vegetable farm nearby here. I'm producing 50,000 tons of vegetable, mostly organic. I'm very inspired of your speak. There's a lot of good idea, but I'm wondering, because when I sell food, food is buy and sell by prices. Most of the consumer buy the cheapest food. So where shall the money come from to make these big changes and all these good ideas you're speaking about? It's mostly to the politician.
Yeah, because if this apple is cheaper than your apple, we will buy it anyway.
Sorry, the cheaper is a type of apple?
No, it costs less. If this costs less
No,
than
but
the
what's-
apple he produces,
You produce apples.
no, vegetables. That was just an example.
Vegetables.
Yeah.
Vegetables. Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry.
Vegetable. And
Vegetables,
mostly
okay.
organic vegetable, I'm producing carrot. And eat carrot instead of apple. That's
Yeah,
a good
Okay. I do. Well, I would say that, for example, I talked about the concrete action that the Common Agriculture Policy has money that then is allocated to the national governments, and the national governments make their agricultural plan, and they can direct public money to help farmers build up installations, have more eco schemes, help them achieve new markets. And so, in the end, this is a public package that has, in the last CAP, 32 billion euros just directed to animal food sector, and we're talking about animal production, feedstocks, exportation. And so if this money is used to the vegetable sector, imagine the possibilities that you would have. For example, in Portugal, we have public money from the national budget and the European funds being directed to the pork sector. That is a huge pollutant of our country and externalizes most of the resources, water, smell, the pig shit, sorry, I don't know, the manure. And so if we direct this money to other types of industries, they will have more capability to reach out new customers, to decrease the value of the products in the citizen. And so I think it's also about policies. How do you direct public money?
And Rasmus, just a short answer. It was Søren, right? Klaus, sorry. How do we make Klaus carrots cheaper than carrots from Holland, for example?
It's really difficult, but what we can see is actually that vegetables are cheaper now compared to meat due to the energy prices. So if you use this crisis as a method to inspire people to eat more healthy and more sustainable, that could be a way of doing it. And we have our labeling. So in the future we'll have a climate label, and if we have a good carrot from Klaus that is organic, then I'm sure that will have the label on it. So it will have the very famous Ø-mærke, the organic brand from Denmark, which is a label as well known in Denmark as Coca-Cola. And then we will have the new climate label, and that will inspire people to buy more of your vegetables. And then I'm sure that in the election campaign there will be discussion, should we look about taxation and all that. But I don't have any policy on that right now, but I'm sure that it will be a part of the debate in the future.
Thank you very much. And that's all we could get. Maybe it'll help you, Klaus. We'll see. Thank you, all of you, Søren Rasmussen, Thor Gunnar Kofod, Rasmus Prehn, and Francisco Jero. Yeah, okay, close enough. And thanks to all of you. There'll be a lunch break here at the climate stage until 2 o'clock. There'll be another debate. What is the social and economic impact of the European green transition? Among others, the ambassadors of both Poland and Belgium in Denmark will discuss this topic. Also, at 1 o'clock, Morten Løkkegaard will be speaking at the Europe stage. Løkkegaard is vice chairman of Renew, a liberal group in the European Parliament. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the festival.
Yeah.